Hi, everyone. My name is Derek Eberly. I'm a small business owner and entrepreneur in the ag sector in southeastern Pennsylvania. Today, my guest and I discuss the philosophy and the why behind why we are involved in farming. This is a long, peaceful conversation that requires great depth of thought. I invite you to join us and slow down, relax, and be thoughtful as you enjoy episode 4 of the Prepared and Peaceful podcast, The Neff Effect. I am learning so much. My goodness, I was hoping to keep up, and I don't know if I am, but
well, we're learning together.
This is really wonderful. And I think for myself, this is the dynamic that I would like to put forth for the Gen Z, which is my specific realm of influence right now. I have several Gen Z employees. And I think it's wonderful, whether it's through work or church or another social institution, if we can begin to generously, lovingly pass down the lessons that we have learned, the truth that we have learned, if we can pass that to another. And the beautiful thing about media is that we can do this at scale.
Right.
And that's why
I'm just slightly concerned about that, but I can share about that.
Go ahead.
We can do it at scale. I am slightly concerned only from the perspective of the same thing we've been talking about, which is
it may be taken out of context.
Yeah. Being in relationship in a a short distance, being local and long-term relationships offers more legitimacy to the feedback loop than when we're engaging on this platform of, let's say, hundreds of people see this, but we have we don't know who they are. And so there is no feedback system when it's a long-distance, short-term relationship. That's how I would describe that.
There's a danger to social media and or educational videos and things if it's not in the context of knowing the person. Well, one consolation is the only people that are watching this right now know me.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Thanks, Mom. Appreciate you.
I'm not saying this isn't a useful tool. I see the potential to fool ourselves into thinking it is we're about something amazing because we're participating in some kind of even the way people participate in a Facebook post. It's like, right. Well, because as if your like makes any difference. It's like
it had no real
your post for that matter. Like if you made some motivational post, sure, God can use it or it can be used to influence other people.
Right.
But I am increasingly growing more convinced that the context within which he prefers to, by design, is, close up, so local, long-term relationship context. So it's not with the masses, it's with the few, which makes sense. I mean, it's what he did with his disciples and all that.
Right.
Which it does bring me to a very interesting pattern, principle. If you want,
I want to know.
If you want, we can go.
Oh
there.
Yeah, I want to know. I got a terabyte of storage on this computer.
Okay.
Which I think is a lot.
It
sounds like a lot.
The principle is the pattern is fractal design. So fractal design would be things that repeat at same form, different size, and I think one of the best ways to get a handle on it is the plant, or like a tree of trees, where you got the main stem system, then you got it breaks down into smaller versions, and keeps doing that down into twigs, smaller versions. So it's a tree of trees, and then your leaves and the vein structure are going to do the same thing. And if you go down into the roots, it's going to do the same thing. Your arterial system's doing the same thing, your airway system's doing the same thing, your nervous system's doing the same thing. It's all throughout all of creation.
That as something expands, it replicates itself in smaller, identical,
and here,
very similar.
Right, and so this statement would maybe summarize why that is, or the how and why is so important, and that is the most effective way for one environment to interface with another is through fractal design. So the plant's interfacing with the atmosphere, and it's the most surface area created in the smallest amount of space, the way it's doing that fractal design element. And so it's all about creating the most surface area or edge habitat, you could say.
Yeah.
Your creeks and your waterways are doing the same thing. It's never a straight line. It's in and out. This is the same fractal design thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
You'll find it along the coastlines. You'll find it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's the most, same with our lungs. That's the most, if you laid out all the alveoli, or however you say that, in your lungs, it's the size of a tennis court in surface area.
Mm-hmm.
But it's compacted. It's inside this small space. So the most effective way to interface, in this case, the oxygen from the atmosphere into my bloodstream
Mm-hmm.
is through fractal design, which is lots of surface area in a small amount of space, or small space.
One of the most efficient uses of space.
Yeah, right. And so the same would be true in terms of if you're interfacing with people. The most effective way to do it is in small forms, small gatherings.
I did not see this coming.
Yeah.
You got me with this one.
So that's why I'm less and less impressed with large gatherings. So I only put that out there as a
lesson from nature.
A lesson from nature as to how we ought to engage with other people.
Yeah, at the very smallest level first.
Mm-hmm. Yep. It's not that we can't do it on that larger scale, but I think that nature offers the blueprint how to do it, which is many different gatherings at scale.
But they may be smaller in their nature.
Yeah, right.
Wow, you punked me with that one. I did. That's a wonderful lesson, literally from the world, as to how humans ought to interact with one another and in the way that they benefit one another, an exchange of information.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm. Or exchange of care or comfort or whatever it is that we need from one another.
Right, and it actually has the ability to, it's more long-lasting when it's in that. Like, I think we fail by design more often than not. It's more of just a failure by design. And so we're designing our systems for the scale, but we don't have the small version happening.
So we have the great big airway, but we don't have the...
Yeah, right. We don't have all the things that, all these littler versions that actually disperse all of the, your airways into your bloodstream, right, through your lungs, but then from there we're
not absorbing the oxygen.
Right, we're not.
We're delivering it to the place where it needs to be, but we don't have the ability to absorb and utilize.
Yeah, I mean, it might even be arguable that we're delivering it to where it needs to be, but yeah, right. But yeah, that concept's the same. Yeah.
Yeah, you're saying that the church, by nature, or let's say any social institution.
We don't need to stay with the church.
Right.
These are universal things. What I'm seeing.
Yes.
I think that's really important. That I'm not here just touting church Christianity,
Correct.
Faith with God. Like this is universal stuff that applies to business, family, social environments, church, governing it works up in there too.
Any interhuman interaction.
And then all the way down to your farms, like managing your own farm or your backyard for that matter.
And how you do that is going to be, oh, wow, this is this is going to be a thinker.
Right.
How am I ever going to edit this together?
I have no idea. I'm fine if you don't. I don't mind if you don't actually use this, and we end up going back and it's like, okay, let's do a little more organized manner of this.
Yeah.
We can do.
Well, there was always going to be a part 2. This was never a part 1. But that's the beauty of it. We have so much flexibility with this.
So here's an outworking of fractal design.
Yeah.
I have found. You asked, what's Tyler's fruit looking like? I think you might have asked earlier.
Yes.
How's it working for Tyler? So because I've seen this principle or this pattern in nature, I have allowed it to inform the way I've engaged with people, church, community. I have found the smaller gatherings to be so much more rewarding. And I'm engaged in a bunch of different ones.
Yeah.
And they... it's where I almost think more than 15 people, your dynamics change enough that you can't. I don't even know if that might even be too many. But
yeah, you introduce some sort of social dynamic that becomes then counterproductive to the interfacing of the components.
Right. So I've been able to engage with those things, and I have no thing in the back of my mind that's like, oh, I wish I could do this at a bigger scale or some. I'm almost running away from large scale opportunities.
Yeah.
Because I so don't believe in it compared to how much I believe that these smaller versions need to be happening. I'm fine with the bigger scale happening, but it cannot be void of the smaller scales.
That it has to happen in our personal circles, in our hearts first, and then it goes to the conversations between individuals that know each other and are locally consistent, or even a family.
Right.
But then, and only then, can these concentric circles continue to grow and become larger.
Right. And part of that is there's all sorts of fruits that come out of that just naturally come out of when we work with the patterns or principles. One of those fruits would be when you're working with smaller versions, which then create this local long-term relationship setting. You have accountability by design, because you can't piss off the guy that's that close to you without hearing about it. And so there's accountability in the system. Whereas when it's from a distance and I'm talking to some guy that's 1,000 miles away or 100 miles away or even just 50 miles away that I have no long-term relationship with, just because we aren't in the same context, you could say. We're not in the same environment. And so by nature, it offers its own accountability. So, we fail by design.
Yeah. And accountability being when we are forced to look at the parts of ourselves that we do not like or must change.
And you're going to hear it through the feedback.
Yeah. Meaning that these small gatherings, the fractal design of mankind, is the thing that is the catalyst for larger change in our world.
Exactly. Of course. Look at nature. It's doing it all the time through a diverse set of players.
Yeah. Saying diverse set of players, you're saying some really unique individuals who are able to come together in unity?
Right. Well, yes.
Without uniformity.
Exactly. Bring it right back home to that.
Yeah.
So in your plant community, it's not just one type of plant ever, anywhere. It's many different plants performing different functions in this little microclimate here, in this little microclimate here. When we work with those systems, we create, I'll just call it a life factor that is cascading, compounding in effect, as compared to when you work against these systems, it is the opposite, which works toward, if you could ever get in desertification in Lancaster County, you got a real problem. There's so much forgiveness in Lancaster County.
In people's hearts or in the land?
In the landscape.
Oh, okay.
That it allows us to do stupid things for a very long time.
It's a forgiving climate here.
It is a very forgiving climate, but it doesn't play games forever.
You're right. There's going to be a time of reckoning.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about. If you know how to read the landscape, we're actually not. That's the thing, is it looks really good, but it's not. It's not very good.
It's not. Do you have a name for this effect, the cascading compounding effect? Do we call it the Neff effect?
The Neff effect.
Yeah. Where
I feel like I'm hijacking Alan Williams. Alan Williams, I think it's his state.
You're adding to it by Fractal Design.
Right. There you go. It's my own little micro version over here.
Yeah.
Probably has application everywhere.
Yeah. And it just strikes me that there's so many people that could get on board with this from every area, from any opinion, that we can say, if we begin to first observe ourselves, then and only then can we begin to observe, to practically affect, to positively affect the world around us.
Right.
That if we first experience personal responsibility, that only then can we change the world.
Yep. And responsibility to what?
And that's where identity comes into play. Because nothing means anything if it's out of context. If we don't know our place as human beings before a creator God, then we're not going to feel the full effect of stewarding the creation that we're living in.
Right. I think part of navigating that responsible to what is, some would describe it as your conscience, and maybe others would describe it as the spirit, maybe others would describe it as, I don't know, sense of self, or maybe sense of self is the result of it.
Yeah.
The fruit of it. But I don't think we practice very well listening to the thing or that which is inside of us and walking toward it, like finding a willingness to repeat it or bring it out into the open. You know, like when you're making your perspective heard and seen. A lot of times we run under the radar or people run under the radar, not speaking their piece or their perspective because they've lived many times of their lives experiencing that culture doesn't want to hear them,
Right.
or family doesn't want to hear your perspective, or your dad doesn't want to hear your perspective, or whatever it may be. I think if you're going to, first of all, navigate the most life-giving journey in your, like the most fulfilling, purposeful life, I think it has very much to do with identifying that voice inside and following it. And like, what's following it? What, speak it forth. Like, what's it, like if you're not comfortable with the situation, can you voice that to whoever makes up the whole, right? Whatever whole you're a part of. If it's a relationship with your family or your spouse or your business or business partner, like there's things that if you're not comfortable with, you have to have what are you responsible to? And I think it's that thing inside. That's the navigational source. And the most rewarding life can be found, I think, when you follow that navigational source.
To really get practical for the listener, what does it sound like to you? What in Tyler's internal experience?
Sure.
Because there might be someone out there who would love to try towards this thing, towards leading a life that is full of identity and purpose, which is the same thing, right?
Yeah, right.
How might they go about starting out how to follow that trail?
My mind was back on identity and purpose. I would describe purpose as a response or an effect of identity. So an outcome.
So it's not the identical same thing.
I don't think it's the same thing. I think it's an outworking of identity. And identity is, I think, that process of hearing the voice inside, the internal voice that speaking the truth. It is difficult for me to explain that, actually.
So my experience has been that there are several different voices that a human being can hear.
Yeah.
First is God's voice. You can also hear the voice of evil. I leave a bit of ambiguity so that each person can layer their own experience here. You can hear your own voice and you can hear other people's voices. And I think becoming discerning as to what you are hearing, which voice you are hearing, is very critical. That for me was one of the first stops on this journey of being able to be led in truth.
Yeah.
Discerning what voice, because if you stop and you hold up that card and you match the color to the voice that you're hearing, then you can begin to a quick study in what each of those voices will say, because it's pretty consistent. That this is a whole sermon of its own. A sermon. It's a whole podcast. Sorry. Millennials give podcasts, not sermons.
Right.
Apparently. But it's a whole study of its own as to the words that each of those voices will say. Or I don't need to dive in on that specifically here, but
what holds true or rings true quite a bit for myself, and again, this is the premise for the mirror image name, is that finding the consistency in that, when you're testing the voices, right, inside or externally coming at you, because it can come from those directions too. So when you're testing those voices, for me, I've found this mirror image perspective to be very informative in that it offers two perspectives as opposed to one. So
it's using both of your eyes to see so you can triangulate,
right,
produce a 3D image.
Right. So that's sort of the premise for the mirror image, is that when you find something true in one environment, right? Okay, so maybe, again, we're talking about voices in our head, but or voices externally coming at us. Sure, yeah, right. So when you find something in one environment that is offered to be true or considered to be true, you can test it against its other environment or its opposite environment, if we're going to say spiritual and physical are opposite environments.
Right.
And so this is the two opinions that can agree. And if they don't agree, well, then you may have a problem in one or the other environment.
It's a bit scientific in a way.
It's a bit.
Yeah.
It's a bit.
Which I really appreciate. Like, there are elements of science that are superb. Testing being one of them.
Yeah, right. This is where I would say that the church is largely running with only 50% of the gospel when they isolate the physical off from the spiritual.
That is a gigantic claim.
It's a gigantic claim. But when you're talking about when you isolate anything from its whole, you're no longer dealing with the same thing. It's a different reality, actually. It's completely different. And whatever you formulate in the way that you ought to live in a place, in a mindset that has things isolated, well, have fun in real life, because that's real.
Yeah.
And what you formulated isn't. This is the whole thing of like gathering, like, do you have context? Context is everything. And things are defined by their context. So as much as the members define the context defines the members. So when you isolate from the context, you're no longer dealing with reality. It's something else.
Yeah, this is the part where I was hoping to keep up, and I'm not doing great.
Okay. Well, let's.
No, this is very good.
We can hit it from a different angle.
But these are all, and I appreciate this because you're building on all of these concepts.
Yeah,
very nicely.
Well, it was actually Masanobu is like the Wendell Berry of Japan.
Okay, you're teaching me.
I didn't know about this guy either until recently, and when I heard the statement again repeated by Alan Williams. So Alan Williams quoted this Masanobu, I think his name, wrote One Straw Revolution. When I heard the statement, I was like, yeah, that's accurate. What he said was, when we isolate anything from its whole, he spoke of it as wholes. When you isolate anything from its whole, you're no longer looking at the real thing. So I'll give you an example. You're looking at
a fraction or a shard of it, and it does not allow you to create an idea.
It'll still look the same. It can still look the same, but I'll give you an example. If you take a pig, for example, again, if members are defined by their context and context is defined by their member, so we'll do an if-then on that. So if that's true, then when you take a pig and you pull it from its environment and put it in a barn, is it still a pig?
By that metric,
Is it still a pig by that metric? Right. This is by this metric. If that's true. So you have to contend with whether or not that's true.
Right. It's certainly not a hog in its fullness of what it was intended to be, and so it's going to be severely limited in its expression of itself.
Right. So it's still going to look like a pig. It'll have all the features of a pig.
Yeah.
But it probably won't smell quite the same. There's a few things that you'll be able to catch especially if you get familiar with the two differences.
Yeah, if you actually have the context.
Right. So the same is true with any like pick anything.
Catching on.
Pick anything that we isolate from its from its whole or context. Right. And when we isolate anything, the part that concerns me the most about all this is because it sounds completely so I think of the sacrifice, right, in back in Genesis, when Cain and Abel both brought a sacrifice. God accepted one and he didn't the other. One
was acceptable fruit, one was not acceptable fruit.
Right. One was exonerated through their sacrifice, and one wasn't. The sacrifices specifically were different in terms of one was a lamb, one was a basket of fruit or something like that. But in terms of the action of doing the sacrifice, they were the same action.
Right.
So what was different? This is very concerning to me.
Yeah.
Because what implications does this have today with the way the fruit that we think is pleasing to God, when he's like, no, that's the wrong fruit.
Yeah.
Or that's the wrong sacrifice. Wrong sacrifice. And it doesn't have to do with what you gave. It has more to do with how you're giving it. Going back to context, or when we isolate something from its context. From its whole. You can so fruit is not fruit. Fruit is fruit. No, it's not. So like an apple grown from, you don't know the quality of the apple as it sits on the shelf. You have to get back to its context to figure out the quality of that apple. Where you're going to go to get context for the apple is you're going to go back to the orchard it grew in. And what does it look like? Is it a complete bare scape on the bottom? Is it a mowed yard underneath? Well, none of those are proper context for creating the healthiest of fruits. Backing up to Cain and Abel, what concerns me so much is that we can produce or try to produce fruit or sacrifice that God is not accepted. He doesn't find it acceptable. All through the prophets, he's doing the same. He's challenging the people with, I never wanted any of this stuff that you guys are doing. It means nothing to me because your heart's not even toward me.
Because the heart wasn't in the right place. That it was completely apart from its whole.
Right. It's not in context. So it's like We talked about earlier with those that participate in the solution, but they're not engaged with the context being the problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you're participating in this practice or this solution or this sacrifice,
Right.
which we're called to be. We're called to be, if you look at the spiritual version of this, we are this living sacrifice.
Right.
But when you do all the motions, but your heart's not in it, what is that? It's not, it's fruit out of context is what it is.
Which is spiritual activism.
There you go. That's exactly what it is.
It's the same thing.
It could be a broad stroke because maybe not all activism is bad, but
right. So,
but yes,
exactly.
Concept.
Yeah, that is a far too broad a stroke. Let me retake that. What would be the proper?
Could be. You could say it could be. See, that's the problem. Is a lot of this is nuanced enough and individual case by case that I'm not here to say this person's doing it, that one's not. This one's doing it. I'm actually more or less saying this is what we are all susceptible to.
Right. It's the human condition.
Right.
Because the other part of the whole being the heart, which is not able to be seen unless, and I would offer that this is where your small groups and prolonged interaction with local people comes in. Mm-hmm. Because the heart is not able to be veiled for an extended period of time among people that you are close with. Right.
It'll reveal itself, and you'll have to pay attention to the feedback. When people tell you you're being a jerk, you're gonna have to listen to it, because by design, and like that, if we would choose to walk toward those things by design, as compared to formulate some kind of false thing that makes us feel good, where let's not engage too closely with anyone because we don't want to hear the feedback. So let's get on a larger scale or larger stage or whatever it would be.
And there's a lot of actual diagnosable disorders around attachment or disassociation in that people are looking at. But each of those just being a manifestation, perhaps, of not wanting to confront the issues within ourselves.
Well, yeah, I think that's what we do.
Yeah. And some of those things that cause the scars or the trauma that causes the pain there, right? That causes pain to be there when you go to actually look at self-improvement or things that you can learn to become better and be more aligned with truth. Some of those things did come from external sources.
Yeah.
Like there were voices that we listened to that we should not have.
Yeah.
And so this is not saying that trauma from an external source does not play a part, because obviously we see that as huge.
It definitely plays a part, yeah.
In the case of fetal alcohol syndrome, that's not something that individual ever picked.
Right.
They didn't commit that.
Right.
But they're going to bear the downstream effects of how, and even physical effects that make it. I only bring that up because, that is a form of state, an internal state that is not correctly interacting with the outside world. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you grow up with a misconception of what it is to, try to learn, or you take some bad advice and it turns out poorly, it's going to have an effect that is isolating you from other people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So is this a good time to begin to land the plane? We're 17 minutes short of 2 hours.
Sure.
Was there anything that you would like to offer to sort of tie it together, something that you really had on your heart that you wanted to make sure you said?
I think it's really important. So for the farmers, we were trying to speak to
well, this has to do with being peaceful as well.
Right.
This is not just the prepared side of things. Farming is how we become prepared.
Right.
And peaceful is the internal state.
One of the things that I think I would like to leave the folks on the other side of the camera,
the listener,
the
good listener,
is for those that are seeking to pursue doing something in terms of producing your own food, whether it's in your backyard and just for your own use, or if you're trying to do a business or set up a farm, even if the vision you feel is from God, and this is one thing I've recognized and have encountered with along the way, is even though the vision you may even feel strongly enough that it's from God, the vision is not your identity, and the farm is not your identity. If those become your identity, they'll be stripped from you in a light manner until you get the message. Mm-hmm. And if not, a stronger manner. I know this to be true, not necessarily even because I've experienced it, but because I just know it's the nature of the thing. Your identity is that important, where it lands or where it is found. Your identity is not in what you do or do not do. That's what I would like to leave with the listeners.
Your identity is found in understanding who you are and what you are.
Mm-hmm. I have found that to be in a relationship with Christ and the Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. And so it involves
that was your way toward finding that out. Toward
right. Mirror Image Farms is more an expression of my identity. Well, that's what it is. It's an expression of my identity. I've had to let go of some different things, pretty big things throughout life, and those were just practice rounds, I would say.
Yeah.
I've
had some practice rounds.
Right. So engage with that. I guess engage with the process.
And to not be so hard on yourself for failure.
Right.
Because you must fail.
It seems that way. I wish it weren't that way, and it makes me wonder a little bit sometimes about why, but it seems like that's the context within which we find meaning and purpose and solutions, and like it's the stuff that sticks. It doesn't stick otherwise.
If you didn't have the need, you would have no reason for the solution.
I don't think so. You would perpetuate and continue in your own agenda. Mm-hmm. You'd be self-oriented for the rest of your life.
And so that the very act of looking away from your own need would be inherently selfish. Your own need for improvement. If you look away from the fact of you need self-improvement, you are not a finely polished being at this moment, is an inherently selfish attitude to hold. Mm-hmm. Because only through the polishing can you then become something that is useful to the kingdom of God, or to your fellow man. I have
a lifetime to go in that process, but I am experiencing different areas where I would say it's been I'm experiencing the cascading compounding effect, and it's a little bit slow. It can be slow at the beginning, but get ready for it and stay engaged with it, because I don't know what's ahead, but I got a sense that there's something quite exciting, and there already is. I've experienced different things along the way too. So,
are you excited for the next, say, 5 years? If I say 4, that's a political statement.
Oh,
but if I say the next 5 years,
yeah. I am both sobered by the climate that we are in, the state of, as the mental climate is what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It's a sobering situation where we're at, but I actually find it to be extremely hopeful as well. I think the darker that it becomes, say, the more we can see the contrast. And I think that's, again, we talked about this possibility, this the whole way through here is, mm-hmm.
Bringing it all together.
So it's a sobering situation, but I for sure have hope. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's when we can actually, like this, it's the soberingness or the disparity or the dysfunction that we experience that actually is our opportunity, is our window of opportunity into seeing that we're going in the wrong direction. So I'm very hopeful that people will take the message, or like take the indicator.
That this will be the evidence that people need to see in order to change their ways.
Right.
And actually create a world or a nation that we want to live in.
Yeah, or a community. Let's just keep it down small again.
Yeah.
This Fractal Design, right? I don't know. There will always be, we're not going to change everyone, and the culture is not going to shift where we'd like to see it in our lifetime, but we need to be able to see where it could be and spend time thinking about where it could be, and then engage with the process of setting it up for that.
The reason I started the Prepared and Peaceful podcast is because I am filled with optimism for the future. Mm-hmm. And that is not from an earthly take, because my earthly take on that was I tried that for a while. It was very depressing. And then I began to ask, and the same as you, I have found that my access to truth best comes through the Holy Spirit. That was the way I was able to engage with truth the most effectively, efficiently. And I believe that the Spirit is saying there's something really good right around the corner.
I do too. The people I'm in communication with, and they're not special people, okay? Yeah. I'm not saying I have some kind of privy to like world changers, except that I think that is actually who they are, because God works more through the smaller versions than the bigger one, is what I what I believe.
That there are people who are actually exhibiting grassroots.
Yeah.
And grassroots is almost reductionist in a way because it doesn't sound effective.
Yeah, right.
I think that term was used to be like, oh, this ineffectual group of people over here that was very small. We're talking about people who are actually going to affect change in their own lives,
right,
in their circles, and then society and a nation.
Right. So in the spirit and in the communication or the spirit that I gather, or that is when I'm with other people and we're around other people, the thing that I hear and the message or the hope, what's on the radar, seems to be the same. Seems to be the same, like there's something, a shift coming, or that is possibly.
So Derek Eberly and Tyler Neff are going on record April 18, 2024, saying that something just around the corner is really good for the United States and for the world, I believe. Do you think it is 10 years? Do you think it's 5? It may not be for us to specifically know. I'm just personally asking you to take a stab at it for posterity.
Yeah. Well.
Because my personal feeling is that it is 5 to 10 years away.
Okay. I don't have a feeling on that one, so I'm not going to even bother. I'm not even going to bother commenting.
I'll stick my neck out on that one personally.
Maybe. I don't know. I guess
listening.
My sense is that it's different timelines for different individuals. So I'm not sure it's a.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's a wholesale shift.
Mm-hmm. Well, if there's one thing we've learned from this interaction is that I tend to paint things with a broad brush and you look at it with a bit more nuance, which I greatly appreciate.
We need them both.
Yeah. Well, there is a need for brevity sometimes, but also sometimes to dig into it. Tyler, this has been outstanding. I can't wait to share this with people. Thank you for coming on today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
And I will include a bunch of links to Mirror Image Farms. If you guys really enjoyed this and want to support Tyler in a way, go check him out.
Sure.
Lots of information there. MirrorImageFarms.com.
That's it.
Thank you again. As always, stay prepared and stay peaceful.